In March 2024, a British nuclear submarine called HMS Vengeance quietly resurfaced after 201 consecutive days beneath the North Atlantic. No sunlight, no fresh air, no solid ground beneath their feet for nearly 7 months. The crew stepped off that vessel having lived through something most humans will never come close to experiencing, and almost none of them will talk about it publicly. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on exactly how that's possible, not the Hollywood version, the real one, with precise numbers, engineering explanations, and a few stories that will genuinely change how you think about military service. Let's get into it. Start with the most basic human need, sleep. On a Virginia-class submarine like the USS Missouri, the standard crew bunk measures 74 inches long, 25 inches wide, and gives you exactly 18 inches of vertical clearance above your face. For reference, a standard refrigerator is wider. Now here's where it gets more complicated. A Virginia-class submarine carries around 135 crew members, but only has 94 bunks. That gap, roughly 40 people, is filled through a system called hot racking. Sailors share bunks in rotation. One person finishes their watch shift, climbs out, and within minutes someone else climbs in. The sheets are still warm. This isn't a metaphor for military sacrifice. It's the literal daily reality. The scheduling system compounds this further. For decades, submarines ran on an 18-hour day, 3 6-hour watch shifts cycling continuously, completely disconnected from the 24-hour world above the surface. Circadian rhythms got disrupted, sleep quality suffered. The Navy recognized this and has been transitioning to a more natural 24-hour cycle on newer deployments, 8 hours on watch, 16 hours off. Early data shows meaningful improvements in crew alertness and performance. Each sailor gets one personal locker, roughly the size of a carry-on bag, for every personal possession they own for 3 months. Books, letters from home, photos. Everything that isn't mission critical has to fit in that space. Here's what's counterintuitive though. Veterans consistently report sleeping better on deployment than on land. The submarine never goes fully silent. There's always a low hum of machinery, the occasional sonar ping, a subtle vibration through the hull. For experienced submariners, those sounds become associated with safety, with the knowledge that the boat is running correctly. The noise becomes the lullaby. Before a submarine departs port, the crew loads approximately 15,000 pounds of food. That works out to roughly 160 pounds per sailor for the entire patrol. 3 full-size pickup trucks worth of groceries for a 3-month underwater camping trip with no option to restock. Space is so constrained that food gets stored in every available cavity on the vessel. Canned goods line the floors of sleeping quarters for the first few weeks. Sailors literally walk on top of stacked cans and lay cardboard over food boxes to sleep. Shower stalls get repurposed as temporary dry storage. The food load functions as a kind of edible infrastructure that gradually disappears as the mission progresses, clearing corridors, freeing up stalls, revealing floor space. The crew eats their way toward comfort. Fresh produce survives roughly 2 weeks, sometimes less, depending on storage conditions. After that, it's canned, frozen, and dehydrated food for the remaining 10+ weeks. Submarine cooks are officially classified among the most skilled culinary specialists in the entire Navy, and the food quality reflects that. Submarines serve 4 meals per day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and what's called mid-rats, midnight rations, a full meal designed for the night shift. The meal schedule rotates so that no single watch group is permanently eating breakfast at midnight or dinner at 6 a.m. It's a small detail that has a disproportionate effect on morale. To give you a sense of the actual quantities involved, a Virginia-class submarine typically carries 1,500 pounds of ribeye, 1,000 pounds of ground beef, 900 pounds of chicken breast, 300 pounds of bacon, 5,500 pounds of flour, and over 1,000 pounds of coffee. That coffee number is telling. Submarines run on caffeine as much as nuclear power. Ice cream is standard. Dessert is served with every meal. This isn't indulgence. It's deliberate policy. The Navy has long recognized that food quality is one of the most effective morale tools available when everything else about the environment is austere. One submarine crew, after 110 days at sea, reported being down to a single canned ham, a large supply of white cake mix, and some dehydrated vegetables. They had consumed their provisions with such precision that almost nothing was wasted. That level of logistical discipline across 130 people over 3 months is genuinely impressive. This is where submarine technology crosses into something that feels closer to space exploration than naval warfare. A nuclear submarine doesn't carry oxygen tanks for the crew. It makes oxygen continuously from seawater. The process is electrolysis. A powerful electrical current is passed through seawater using proton exchange membrane cells splitting H2O into its components. Oxygen is captured and fed into the boat's atmosphere. Hydrogen is safely vented overboard. The numbers: an average adult requires approximately 600 liters of oxygen per day. For 130 crew members, that's 78,000 liters of oxygen needed every single day. The submarine's oxygen generators produce this continuously, powered by a nuclear reactor that runs for 25 years without refueling. The practical implication is that a submarine's endurance underwater is not limited by oxygen or power. It's limited by food. Fresh water follows a similar principle. The submarine's distillation plants heat seawater, capture the steam, and condense it back into pure water, leaving salt and contaminants behind. These systems can produce between 10,000 and 40,000 gallons of fresh water daily, enough to supply a small town. The majority goes toward cooling the boat's electronics and reactor systems, with the remainder allocated for drinking, cooking, and personal hygiene. Carbon dioxide removal is handled by chemical scrubbers, typically soda-lime compounds, sodium hydroxide and calcium hydroxide, that react with CO2 molecules and trap them chemically. The submarine also runs sophisticated atmospheric monitoring systems using mass spectrometry and infrared analysis, continuously tracking oxygen, CO2, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and trace chemical levels. These systems have logged over 5 million operational hours with documented availability above 99%. That's a reliability benchmark that most consumer technology can't match. Unglamorous, but essential. Modern submarines use vacuum toilet systems, similar in concept to commercial aircraft lavatories but more sophisticated. Waste moves into a vacuum holding tank, then into a pressurized sanitary tank. The design ensures that even when the main tank is being discharged, the toilets remain operational. This matters more than it sounds. On earlier submarine designs, operating the waste disposal system incorrectly could result in a catastrophic backflow. Sewage into the submarine. The consequences for morale and hygiene in a sealed environment are obvious. Tanks are discharged by pressurizing them with compressed air and expelling the contents overboard, but only in international waters and at least 3 nautical miles from shore, in compliance with maritime environmental regulations. Solid waste is compacted into perforated steel cans fabricated on board, 28.5 inches long, 9 inches in diameter, weighted with metal to ensure they sink, and ejected through a dedicated trash disposal unit that functions essentially as a small torpedo tube for garbage. Before departure, all food shipments are unpacked, dockside, and cardboard is left behind. Nothing boards the submarine that isn't accounted for in the waste plan. The technology keeps sailors alive. The culture keeps them functional. One of the most important unwritten rules on a submarine: no politics. In a sealed vessel where 130 people cannot leave, avoid each other, or decompress anywhere else, divisive political conversation is understood by everyone to be a threat to unit cohesion. It's not written in any regulation. It doesn't have to be. The environment enforces it. Noise discipline is treated as a matter of respect and readiness. Someone is always sleeping, always resting for the next watch cycle. Doors are never slammed. Voices in berthing areas stay low. After a few weeks, these behaviors become automatic. Movement through the boat is its own choreography. Corridors are narrow enough that 2 people passing each other require a coordinated lean and step. A physical negotiation that happens dozens of times per day without conscious thought. Water conservation shapes shower etiquette. Despite the submarine's ability to generate fresh water continuously, running pumps at full capacity creates acoustic signatures that compromise stealth. The standard approach: wet down, shut off the water, soap up completely, water back on, rinse. Total time, 3 to 5 minutes. It becomes habit within days. Submarine service is entirely voluntary. The community represents roughly 1% of all Navy personnel. The qualification process for new crew members, called earning your dolphins, the submarine warfare pin, requires demonstrating comprehensive knowledge of every major system on the boat and the ability to respond correctly to any emergency scenario. It's evaluated by veterans who hold every crew member's life in context because that's exactly what's at stake. On April 14, 1945, 24 days before Germany's surrender, the German submarine U-1206 was operating in the North Sea, equipped with a new high-pressure toilet system designed to allow waste disposal at depth without surfacing. The system was complex enough that it required specially trained operators. Captain Karl Adolf Schlitt used the toilet himself and couldn't navigate the valve sequence. He called for engineering assistance. In the confusion, the wrong valve was opened. Seawater flooded the toilet compartment and reached the submarine's battery banks. The chemical reaction produced chlorine gas, a lethal poison, throughout the vessel. Schlitt faced a decision with no good options: stay submerged and risk killing the entire crew, or surface in daylight in waters actively patrolled by British aircraft. He surfaced. British planes spotted them immediately. One crew member was killed in the attack, several more were lost when the submarine sank after Schlitt ordered it scuttled. The 46 survivors, including Schlitt, were captured. A toilet valve, 24 days before the war ended. This incident directly influenced the redundant safety designs and intensive crew training that define modern submarine operations. Every backup system, every drill, every checklist has a story behind it. What kind of person voluntarily does this? The psychological demands are distinct from physical ones. There's no privacy, no escape from your shipmates, no variation in environment, no natural light cues to anchor circadian rhythms. The horizon, something humans have used instinctively to orient themselves for all of history, simply doesn't exist. Submariners develop what amounts to a practiced discipline of contentment. The traditional submarine pastime is cribbage, a card game with roots going back centuries in the Royal Navy. Movie nights become genuine social events. Cooking elaborate meals from official armed forces recipe guides becomes a highlight. Physical fitness gets creative. The torpedo room doubles as a gym. A single stationary bike wedged into a corner gets scheduled out by rotation. The psychological pressure is matched by the professional one. In an environment where a misread valve or a skipped checklist step can cascade into a fatal emergency, the margin for error approaches zero. Every crew member carries that awareness at all times. Rather than being crushing, most submariners describe it as clarifying, a focused state of competence and mutual accountability that's hard to replicate in any other environment. The bonds formed on deployment are the kind that last decades after service ends. Submariners tend to find civilian life slightly disorienting by comparison, not because it's worse, but because it rarely requires that level of sustained collective precision. Back to where we started. HMS Vengeance, 201 days submerged. March 2024. The nuclear reactor could have run for another 24 plus years. The oxygen and water systems had no foreseeable limitation. The crew's physical and psychological resilience held. What ultimately defines the ceiling for submarine endurance isn't propulsion or life support. It's provisions. The moment the food runs out, the mission ends. American submarine deployments typically run 60 to 80 days for ballistic missile submarines, SSBNs, with some surveillance and fast attack missions extending to 6 months or more. The USS Missouri during one deployment spent 163 of 181 days underwater. These aren't accidents of scheduling. They reflect deliberate operational planning designed to keep submarines, and the deterrence they represent, continuously present in contested waters. The men and women aboard those vessels accept, for the duration of their service, a life structured almost entirely around collective mission. Sunlight, seasons, weather, the passage of ordinary days. All of it paused. They return changed, mostly in ways they can't easily explain to people who weren't there. Submarine service doesn't make the news often, which is, in a way, the point. The effectiveness of a nuclear deterrent depends on uncertainty, on an adversary never knowing exactly where these vessels are or when they might act. The silence is the strategy. But that silence also means the people maintaining that deterrent, running those systems, sharing those bunks, and rationing that last canned ham, they largely go unrecognized. If this gave you a more concrete picture of what that service actually looks like, hit the like button and subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. We cover the realities of military operations, technology, and history that most channels don't get into the detail on. Thanks for watching.